What's up guys, my name is Andy. I get a lot of questions about the cars that I work on and the projects that I work on, and I try to answer those questions in the videos, or I'll make a video about it. And one of the questions I get asked a lot is, what tools do I use, or what tools do I like, or what tools would you recommend for doing a given project? And I haven't really been avoiding that subject. It's just, it's a complicated one because there's so many different tools that I use depending on what I'm working on. And so I figured maybe what I can do is try to compile a list of maybe 10 tools or categories of tools of what I use, and then show you what I use, and you can go from there. This is not really an endorsement on any one particular brand. I just use what I have. Sometimes it's what I had from before. Sometimes I sought these tools out. So let's just go right in and see what I have. This is one of those things that I don't really need to point out. I mean, you need a toolbox to put all your tools in. This is less about what kind of toolbox you have or how many drawers it has. I started off with something that was like a plastic carrying case, kind of like these things up here where you've got tools in them. That's what I started off with before I was able to buy these over time and start collecting these tool sets. So this is not what I was going to point at. What I was going to go to, this is first thing on my list here is, socket set and wrench set. This is obviously over several years of collecting them, and got lots of different bits and pieces and stuff, deep sockets and short sockets, metric and standard. Then you got 1/2-inch stuff. I got all kinds of sizes and bits and pieces that I've collected over the years, but this is something that just makes the job absolutely something that can be done. And if I find that I need a socket, if I didn't have, one of these or something, I'd go get it and I could use it, and then I put it in the drawer and I've got it for next time. So a basic set of sockets and wrenches, and then going into wrenches is the other part of that. Having a good set. These happen to be, I have a lot of Craftsman hand tools. They're not the best out there, but they're pretty good. There's a lot of people are partial to different brands. This has been good to me, it's worked for me, and so I continue to use these wrenches and stuff because they've been working for me. A little bonus tip is something like these ratcheting box end wrenches. This really makes a big difference on some jobs where you can't lift the wrench to put it back on there and move it around or whatever. Just having this kind of ratchet style is fantastic. And I've got that set there, and then I've got a metric set up here that, see, it's got a right, on and off switch, so you can go which way ever you're going. So just having a good set of wrenches and sockets and ratchets is really kind of the first thing that I would put on my list to make sure you have. And you guys probably already have these, but accumulating something like this is what I'd be going for. Another item on my list is a good torque wrench. Now this particular brand isn't an exciting brand, but it does the job for most of what I need to do. But having a good torque wrench can make a big difference. But when you really need to make sure that you've got something exacting, I had done some rod bearings on a BMW I had quite a while back, and I needed a really good, accurate torque wrench. So spent the money and got one of these guys. These digital, they're fantastic. To be honest, I forget that I have it half the time because it's in a box tucked in the back. But when you really need something good, this is something that I recommend. It's getting a good torque wrench for when you need it. But most of the time, something like this will do most of what you need. Another good item to have is a good set of wire cutters and crimpers. This is something that makes a big difference. Any kind of electrical work that you're doing, you can go and buy those real cheap, flimsy guys like this that will do some crimping and some wire stripping, but a lot of times this thing will flex and bend and it won't crimp the wire correctly. So, you got to get away from these guys, but it's not easy, I understand. And start looking at some, better tools that will do the job, that are designed to do what you're looking for, and try to get less of the all-in-one unit and get a special unit that will do what you're looking for. And then you can start graduating up to those and getting these kind of guys that will do exactly what you need. In fact, this is great because you can change these jaws out for different dies, do different set of crimping and stuff. So this kind of stuff, over time you start collecting this stuff, and it makes a big difference when you have something, good in quality versus something that's cheap that you struggle with and you wish you had something nice. And while we're talking about electrical, getting yourself a multimeter or a voltmeter is fantastic. There's some brands out there that I would like to get, but they're just outside of the budget. So you stick with what works. Some of these most of the stuff that we're going to be doing on our cars is going to be DC stuff. But depending on what you're doing, you may need to dip into the AC world. But getting something that will be kind of an all-in-one unit would be ideal on something like this, something that will automatically default to what you're looking for. It will recognize you know, the circuit that you're in and automatically switch over to that can make a big difference, but that stuff can start to get pricey. But getting yourself a good multimeter will help you chasing a lot of those electrical demons that, that seem to plague us all. So battery operated tools can be a topic of debate depending on which brand. Some people are brand yellow, some people are brand red. There's other popular brands out there, and people will die on that hill defending their brand. And what I have found is that more or less they're the same from product to product. Some have a little bit of advantage here and there, but for the most part, you stick with what works. And the problem that I get into is once you get into their ecosystem, you're kind of stuck. For example, these battery packs are really the most expensive part. These tools, while they can be expensive, proportionally, these battery packs, you know, are very expensive. So, but you only need one that you can switch from tool to tool if you're in that particular voltage range. And it makes it easy. Once you kind of get into their system, you can continue to buy them more tools. That's kind of why I've got a lot of DeWalt products here. I bought one drill, and then I bought another one, and then I got to get an impact driver and stuff. And so then I need a battery pack, and then I got to buy another battery pack because I don't want to have to switch them back and forth. I got a couple sitting on the shelf that are all charged up, ready to go. And I've got some other tools that are just sitting on the side that need battery packs. You kind of get stuck in that world, but I'm not finding, at least, you know, particularly with these here, these are great, but this is a different voltage system. So there may be more available torque on these, but I'll get the speed out of these, you know, or whatever. So it kind of depends on where you're at and what you want to go with. If you're going to buy some battery tools, obviously getting yourself a drill, something that's compact is fantastic. This guy, you'll notice here, this is a little bit bigger. This one, you know, it's got a little bit more torque options on here, or the clutch, sorry, than this one does, but it's more compact, so I tend to use this guy more. Then I've got myself just a 3/8 little ratcheting impact guy here that has come in handy. Then you got a 1/2 inch, and you start finding that you need to buy, okay, now I want to buy the other thing, and now I got to get the other piece. So, but getting yourself just a good drill is a good place to start, and it really doesn't matter, I don't think, whether you start with DeWalt or Milwaukee or Bosch, Porter Cable, Makita. There's a lot of brands out there. But getting something to get you started is where you're going to want to be. And I don't think you're going to be disappointed with any of the kits that you start with. But once you solve the debate about which brand you're going to go with, then there are limitations to batteries. And so the next topic that I've got here is, you know, plug-in power versus air power versus battery power. Where do you go? That's a tough question. The portability of battery is fantastic, right? Obviously, wherever you want, no cables, no hoses, it makes sense. But you are limited to the battery pack that you're on there. And of course, you can get a bigger battery pack. But depending on the operation, it can really drain those batteries fast. For example, something like a Sawzall like this that can really draw a lot of current when you're cutting through something really hard. Having that wall power where you've got this continuous power is fantastic. So it's almost better to go with something like that if you've got the cord to go with it to get wherever you need to go, because you're gonna need that kind of power. But if you're just doing a couple of quick cuts, maybe just a couple quick cuts with the jigsaw or a skill saw or something like that, then, you know, maybe battery power is the best way to go and you don't have to drag a bunch of stuff out. If you're doing a long, continuous, maybe not a lot of current draw, but just a long time, something that's air powered may be the route for you, but then you got to have the air system to go with it. So it's it's one of those things where you kind of got to fit the tools for what you're doing and what you need. Trying to do everything out of battery, it can be done, but you're going to just find you need a lot more battery packs to get where you need to be. Having everything with a cord, of course, that's unlimited power, I guess, right? But then you got to drag those cords around, and same thing with the hose. But like I have an air compressor, and it just doesn't have the capacity for me to run like a DA sander or something like that. Even one of these I'm at the limits of my compressor running one of these guys for any length of time. So do I get a battery power one? I did, and I'm liking this thing a lot. This little guy has been fantastic, but I haven't reached the limit where I've run out of juice because I've been running it for a long time like you could with one of these. So I'll probably find out more about that as I get down the road. So, but yeah, that's kind of the topics between battery and power, or battery and wall power versus air power. Another item on my list is a welder. Now this is not going to fit a lot of people. Not everybody's comfortable with welding. Not everybody needs to do any welding. I have dabbled in this world a little bit. I started with it was a little Lincoln MIG welder flux core. I think I paid like $100 for it or something. It was just a little guy. It made some welds, but it more or less made a mess, and partly because of me, because I don't really know a lot about it, but it got the job done. It did a couple of welds, and then I upgraded to something like this, which I'm limited to running, where I'm at 110 volts or 120 volts. So I don't have a 220 option to run some of the bigger welders. So you fit something that goes with the garage and what I can use here, and this is something like this little guy, this little MIG welder. It does all right for heavier gauge steel, but getting into thin stuff like 18 gauge, 16 gauge, 14 gauge, that kind of stuff, this thing, I think more comes to the skill of myself than the welder, but getting into a welder is something that's on a lot of our lists, but it comes at a cost. I mean, getting a tank, a bottle, just by itself is not cheap. Then you got to get it filled up all the time. Getting yourself a cart, mask, getting the tools. This is a little bit of an investment, but I do think when you get into this world, getting in here and getting something, get you going is probably the best part. Then you can save up and get something that's real fancy. But for now, just getting in there and just laying some beads, right, making some welds, getting that experience is probably the best thing that we could do. But this is on my list because I do a little more of this than I probably should welding, but I want to do more. So having something like this has been an integral part to the tools that I use. Another item on the list of tools to have is a set of calipers. You don't need a real fancy set, just something cheap like this will do what you need to do. The most important part is that it's a little more accurate than doing a tape measure. And while I don't need to do something where I'm down to the thousandth of an inch on pretty much anything I do, this will do the job. This will get me where I need to be, and I can measure stuff out and get the bore of something or whatever. And this is something that's just good to have. And in fact, I used it the other day when I needed to measure the bushings for a door hinge that I wanted to repair. And I needed to measure what the diameter was so that I can make sure that I was getting the right parts. And so having something like this can make a big difference, when you're trying to find out if this, the part that I have, is the right part. These are some tools that I never thought I would have ever sought out. If you'd have told me a long time ago to get yourself a set of nut drivers, I would have laughed and thought that I don't need something like that. This kind of tool has been invaluable. It's amazing how many times you need to take the nut off a bolt or the bolt out of something that if you could just spin it like a screwdriver, something would come right out instead of getting the ratchet out and going back and forth with the ratchet. And something like this, I use this stuff all of the time. Granted, if you were gonna torque something down, you wouldn't use these, but just it's amazing how many times I've used these to take something out and instead of having to get the other tools out and mess with it. So a set of nut drivers is definitely something that I'd recommend getting. The next item on my list is organization drawers and stuff like this. Another one of those things that I never really thought that I needed, and I only started out with one, then I needed another one, then I needed another one, and pretty soon I've got a whole set of these, and it's amazing how fast I fill them up with various things. In fact, I've got a bunch of stuff where I've got the drawers labeled of what size they are so that I can figure out if I need something out of there or whatever. I've got a bunch of electrical stuff. It's amazing how often I'll go through and like, oh, perfect, I've got that one drawer that's got that thing in it, and I'm set and good to go. Just having some organization makes a big difference in keeping your shop clean, your work area clean, and keeping everything organized so you can continue to work on your car and not get bogged down by having a bucket of bolts that you got to dig through to find the one that you need. And how about a bonus 11th topic or 11th item? It's really kind of a setup between the floor jack and some jack stands and maybe even something like this quick jacks. Just having something like that can go a long ways in getting you set up for your car, getting things put up so you can get to it, get underneath it, and having a good brand. There are much better brands out there than the stuff that I have, but I've worked my way up over the years of the cheap little $25, $50 one or whatever you got at a secondhand store or a yard sale or something. And finally, spend a couple more dollars and get something nice that will lift things up and be pretty sturdy. That makes a big difference. The mechanism doesn't wear out on you. Having jack stands that are they're going to be the size for the part that, if you're working on a big truck, having a small set like this is probably not ideal. And maybe you need something more, a big guy like this guy here. And so having the right set of jacks for what you're working on makes a big difference. And try to stay away from ones that are rusted and damaged because you don't want that car falling on you. And then having something like these quick jacks, I did a whole video on these and what I think about them, and they've been fantastic for what they do. Again, they're a little bit more expensive than a lot of guys want to spend on something like that, but it does get the car up and out of the way, and you can get to the front or the back half of the car really easy and get to anything you need to do there, where these jacks typically don't go up as high, so you can always get something like that. But that's just kind of the last little bit that, you know, maybe not the main categories I was saying earlier, but something like these jack stands and stuff like this in this floor jack is something that I would probably put on the list if I was recommending tools to buy. So guys, that's just a quick overview of some of the categories of tools that I use. You got to see a lot of the stuff that I use, get to see the toolbox. There's a lot of drawers on there and a lot in there, but I didn't want to go over, you know, all the various screwdrivers that I have. And I've got a pry bar in there and that kind of stuff for the air compressor. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't cover, but these are some of the bigger topics that I thought were more important. And from that list, you guys can go through there and say, hey, I like that stuff, I want to get one of those, or maybe I want to get a better version of that. And it's just something as you go over time, you'll collect some tools and then you use what you got. And times when you don't have the right tool, that's when you can justify getting the right one and getting a new one, and that's always fun. So anyways, if you guys like the video, give me a thumbs up. And if you subscribe, I appreciate it because it helps my channel out, and we'll see you in the next one.